Hey, seventh graders. I've got a short video today to help you get into the first stage of research for your annotated bibliography. And if that word sounds unfamiliar, that assignment sounds unfamiliar, let me remind you that I have another video that if you were at school last week, you were able to see that video. If not, it is in Google Classroom, and you can also take advantage of seeing it there. But I just used a video to introduce this assignment, which is an annotated bibliography. So briefly, to do an annotated bibliography, it just means we're going to look at some sources and record a little bit of information about those sources. It's really like the first step. If you were doing a longer research project, like a researched essay, an annotated bibliography is one of the ways where you just sort of throw out a net and try to pull in a bunch of information. So you just kind of get a sense for what your topic really is about. So to get us started into this process, and by the way, this is the assignment sheet. This is posted in Google Classroom. You have access to this, and it kind of helps you to remind you. These are the questions that we're after. What causes conflict between races, classes, religions, or other groups? How are these conflicts made worse? How can these conflicts be resolved? Those are kind of what we're after, so that when we get into actually reading this novel and we read about the conflicts that are going on between these gangs, we'll kind of have some grounding for understanding, okay, so why do these things happen in real human cultures? What's going on here? And we can understand the theme of the novel better. So if you haven't taken some time to see that video and to look at this handout, you need to do that. And that will help today's assignment make more sense. So what we're doing today is you're going to be just beginning this process. You're going to start out with doing some broad research for that annotated bibliography. Okay, so let me kind of step you through this just in a short video, and then you'll use class time to start working on this. Okay, so it says in order to research a specific conflict, we need to define some terms and record some general information. So to even get to the point where you know, hey, this is the particular conflict that I'm going to research and find sources and make my summaries and do my quotes from. Before we even get there, you just kind of have to know something about the general topics that we're dealing with. So your goals for this particular assignment would be to define 3 types of conflict and give examples of each. And you'll find the ones that you need to define in these following slides. You're going to go ahead and have a copy of this for yourself. So you're going to define 3 types of conflict, give an example of each, and then you're going to narrow your own field of research. Okay, so we're throwing out this big net to try to catch a bunch of information, and then you're going to look at that information and go, okay, so I'm most interested in this kind of conflict, this particular thing, this time period, the people that were involved, and so I'm going to go with that one. And that's our goal today is to narrow your topic so that you kind of end up thinking, all right, I have an idea what specific conflict I'm going to research. To do that, you're going to make a copy of this slideshow that you're looking at right now. This is available to you in Google Classroom, and so when you click on that link, it's going to be really, really important that the first thing that you do is make a copy and rename it. All right. So to make a copy, some of you have seen this before, you've done this before, but let me remind you, you come up here to File, and you click Make a Copy, and you want the entire presentation. And once you click that, it's going to ask you, what would you like this to be called, and where would you like to keep it in your Google Drive? So what I would like you to do in order to keep track of this, you're going to use the title that you see here, first initial, last name, conflict research. And so if I go here and make a copy, I'm going to say J. White conflict research. That's going to be the title. And then I can just kind of figure out where I want it. Like if I have files and stuff in my own Google Drive, if you have kind of set these things up at all, then you can go into your different files and pick a place where you want it to stay. All right. Your Google Drive is going to look different from mine. But if you have you have a file for English and a file for literature, different things like that, then you can organize it. And as soon as you do that, you hit OK, it's going to open up a new version of this slideshow, your own personal version of this slideshow. And then you're actually going to use these slides to complete your information. So you'll go ahead after you've made a copy and renamed it, you're going to fill in the requested information in each of the following slides, and I'll show you what that requested information is. But you're just going to be doing internet searches, doing a little bit of reading, and then you'll double click inside the shapes in these different slides and add the information that you find. All right. So it's basically just some searching. All right. You're trying to figure out some answers to some questions. And then when this is completed, you're just going to share it with me, johnwhite@northwoodacademy.com. That would mean you come up here and you start typing my name in this box, and you'll see John White pop up, and so you'll be able to do that. All right. So that's going to be, I don't know what I just did. I wasn't paying attention. That's what you're going to do. You're going to make a copy, rename it. You're going to go and do your searching and then fill in your information and then share it with me. Now, this may not be completed all in this class period today. If you are working steadily on this and you don't get it done during class today, then don't stress out about that. We will have other literature class periods this week to be able to work on it. But it is important that you take your time and kind of do good research on this. All right. So once you've made a copy, you have changed the file name so that you have it the way that you want it, and then you are looking at your own version of these slides. You're going to just go through and answer the questions that are on each slide. The first one says, what is ethnic or racial conflict? The second slide is going to ask you, what is class conflict? Third one, what is religious conflict? And so you go and you just do some Google searching for some of that information. And when you find something that you feel like, hey, this defines that term, ethnic conflict or racial conflict, you just double click in that box and you see the pointer pops up there and you start typing your definition. And you can kind of use the space that's here. If you need to move things around a little bit, that's okay. But then after you have, gotten a good definition for that, you also need to come over here and say, all right, so where did this come from? So I'm asking like for a specific URL. Here's what you cannot do. You cannot just type Google. You just won't earn credit for that. That doesn't tell me anything about where you got that from. So maybe there's a specific page on history.com. Maybe there's something, when I did a Google search, it took me to a Wikipedia article. You're going to need to record that information here. So for example, open up a new tab and I'll just type in, what is ethnic conflict? And I'm going to see what happens. So I've got Britannica, an encyclopedia, as my first entry. That's an option. I could click through there and read about it from Britannica. And if I find that that definition makes sense for me, I'll record some of that information and I'll be able to put it into my slideshow. Just kind of record my own ideas of what that was. But then I need to come back in here and say, all right, this is where this came from. I'm going to copy that and I'm going to paste it into this spot over here to say, where did my information come from? I need that kind of thing. You can't just say I found it from Google or I found it from Wikipedia. We need it to be an actual specific web address if it comes from a website. If you happen to, find books or history books or things like that about this, then it would just be a book title and author. Okay. So that's going to be what you're working on. You're going to get a definition. You're going to tell where it came from. And then you'll come down here a little bit further and you'll even look up an example of this type of conflict. All right. So I might go back to my Google search and say, what kind of ethnic conflicts have happened in history? Or I might type historical ethnic conflicts, or I might just put ethnic conflict and see what comes up. You are going to need to be careful. And if you've tuned out, then tune back in. You are going to need to be careful when you're doing these kinds of searches. Again, we are not doing image searches. because some of the things that will be out there are somewhat grisly. We want the information here without glorifying the violence that accompanies these kinds of conflicts. Okay, we've got to know something about these kinds of conflicts if we want to understand the novel, and if we want to avoid these kind of things in the future, we got to know about them. But that doesn't mean that we're going to sit here and be clicking through pictures and seeing the gory details. That's not what this assignment is. And I can assure you that you will be in trouble. If that's what you're after here, there's going to be some consequences for that. Okay. So please make sure that as you're going through this, we're not doing this for morbid curiosity. Like I'm not trying to get into this and look for pictures and body counts. That is not what this assignment is. We need to understand these kinds of conflicts, but we want to do that in a cautious and caring way. Not thinking, oh, these are things that happened to people a long time ago and it doesn't really matter that much. Quite the opposite, actually. Some of these things have happened in very recent history, and we need to understand it. We need to know why and how, and think about ways that they can be avoided in the future. So as you're doing your Google searching, be mindful of that. Try to find an example of each of these, and then you'll just type your kind of summary of one particular example, all right? So an ethnic or racial conflict might be the Holocaust. It was the termination of ethnically Jewish people. So you have a definition of what ethnic conflict is, and then you could say, all right, well, down here, one example of ethnic conflict is the Holocaust. And then you would find some information and kind of go through and talk about, in your own words, and you don't have a lot of space here, but in your own words, what do you find about that as you're doing your internet searching? Just a little bit of brief information. And then I am going to ask you to come over here to this bottom thought bubble and just record some of your own thoughts and feelings about that particular conflict that you read a little bit about. Okay? So just kind of as you're reading through, what does that make you think of? What does that make you feel as you're kind of working through some of this information? So to recap, on each of these slides, you're getting a definition for what the slide is talking about. You're telling where that information came from. Usually a website URL is going to be in that spot. And then you're going to discuss just one example of that kind of conflict. Class conflict, the French Revolution might be an example of class conflict where the lower class rose up and got rid of many of the upper class people, the aristocrats in France, the ruling class. And so you might search up French Revolution or other kinds of revolutions like that and put down, where are you getting your information about your definition? And then what are your thoughts about the example that you happen to find? All right. You'll do that for ethnic conflict. You'll do that for class conflict. You'll do that for religious conflict. And then you'll come down here to this last slide and it'll say, just based on what you've seen and read so far, which one do you think you're going to go for? Do you think you're going to be researching a religious conflict, a class conflict, or an ethnic or racial conflict? And then the last thing that you would do to complete this assignment before sharing it with me would be to go ahead and just list out some of those possible topics for you. So if you decide after looking at these three topics, I think a class conflict is going to be what I'm kind of most interested in, then you're going to list some examples of class conflicts. So you'll just try to find maybe a list in Google or Wikipedia that is, some examples. The French Revolution would be one example, and you'd have maybe 3 or 4 different options. Because what we want to do by the end of this part of the stage of research is go from saying, like, there's this huge category. We're researching a huge category of stuff, these different types of conflicts, and we want to go narrower and narrower until we get to, now my research field is narrow. I know kind of exactly what type of conflict I'm going to be researching, and maybe even one specific conflict like the Holocaust. Like that might end up being what some of you decide to do your research on. Okay, so that's the project for today. And again, based on kind of what's here, I wouldn't necessarily expect you to be able to get this finished just in the rest of this one class period. So don't be rushing to finish in this class period. Be interested in doing good research, getting good definitions, writing good information down, and I'll make sure that we have time to continue it another literature class this week. Okay, y'all always email me if you have any questions, and I'll look to be back with you guys on Thursday. All right, take care.